he joined. The other mayor candidate is joining.
Okay, good evening, everyone. Welcome and thank you for joining the Hood College's Political Science Department and the City of Frederick's Neighborhood Advisory Councils for this 2021 Mayoral Candidate Forum. My name is Tamlin Tucker-Works, and I'm the Political Science Department Chair at Hood College, and I will moderate tonight's forum. I am joined by my colleagues and co-organizers, Peter Brim and Kim Wellington, both Neighborhood Advisory Council coordinators, and Tashara Dean, who is a student at Hood College. At Hood College, one of our core values is democracy. And at a time where national politics garner so much attention, it feels very important to spotlight local politics that directly impacts you, the residents of the city of Frederick. And so we are very excited to help facilitate this discussion among those running for the top job in Frederick city government, the mayor of the city of Frederick. Before we go any further, I want to let you know that this event is being recorded. So I just want to let you know that. Each candidate will provide opening statements, followed by responses to at least 4 and maybe 5 questions, and end with closing statements. That's depending on our time. The questions came from the residents of the city of Frederick, and we want to thank all of you who submitted questions. 6 of the 7 candidates who will participate in the primaries agreed to participate in tonight's forum and are here tonight. We want to thank each of the candidates and welcome them here tonight. They are Jeremy Abbott, and you can wave your hand so that people know who you are when, although your names are there, but okay. Jennifer Doherty, John Funderburk, Stephen Hamrick, Michael O'Connor, and Roger Wilson. So we're going to begin with opening statements. The candidates are answering questions in a randomized order which alternates who will respond first and who will respond last to each question. Each candidate will have 1 minute for opening statements. In the interest of time, our Hood College student, Tashara Dean, will put a hand up when there are 15 seconds left. She's going to put up a virtual hand. And so I want you to look for that. And then I will verbally alert you and let you know that your time has expired. And so we want to keep it moving and give each other a chance to speak. So we're going to start with Jeremy Abbott, and we want 1 minute of an opening statement.
My name is Jeremy Darius Abbott. I'm running for the office of the mayor of Frederick. I'm running for a multitude of reasons, but frankly, I feel a lot of investment in the community because the community invested a lot in me. In the 5th grade, I moved from a really rough area in PG County, and for the first time in my life, community members took an interest. And so for that very reason, I'm taking an interest. And I feel as though there is not enough of the community's interest at City Hall. So that's why I'm running for mayor of Frederick.
Thank you. Thank you. Our next speaker is Jennifer Doherty.
Thank you for having us. I appreciate the opportunity. I'm Jennifer Doherty and I'm running for mayor. I've been a business owner in Frederick since 1987, and I actually served as mayor from 2002 to 2006, during which time we developed Carroll Creek Phase 1, hired a chief of police who lasted 10 years, earned the first accreditation for our police department, created the Department of Economic Development, built the one-stop shop and parking structure on West Patrick Street, expanded businesses like MedImmune, Wool Furniture, Home Depot, Wells Fargo, and Boscov's. And we did even more than that. We completed East Street to Walser Drive to alleviate traffic. We actually created the Neighborhood Advisory Councils. I'm the mother of the NACs. So I feel like my child is all grown up. We increased diversity in our workforce because it was the right thing to do, and we didn't need a consultant to do it. And I mention these things because I think it's important. I think it's important to know that there is someone with a record of accomplishment. Last primary, about 3,000 people voted in the city election. That's not enough. We need to have people who actually give a shit about voting. And I want you to care about this election.
Thank you. Thank you. Our next candidate is John Funderburk.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for having me. I'll be pretty short and simple and sweet. I'm running for mayor because I have innovative solutions that the other candidates don't have or other candidates have thought of. My innovations are not based on what the taxpayer can do or taxpayer money, but it's based off of the public-private partnership. I bring new ideas, I bring new energy, and I bring a new commitment to bringing Frederick forward to the 21st century. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next candidate is Stephen Hamrick.
Hello, my name is Stephen Hamrick. The personal aspirations that I have to run for the mayor of City of Frederick are based on the ideas of preserving the hard work and integrity the local community has strived so hard to achieve over the last several decades. My professional career is extremely dynamic, from Cisco network engineering, small business consultation, to my current career, which I've held for 15 years being an elevator mechanic. It genuinely lionizes the fact I understand the complexities of being a blue-collar, white-collar worker, traveling 270 every day while being the solution to trials and tribulations of small business owners. The experiences and successes that I've gained through my life are indicative of my abilities to understand and differentiate between a multitude of skill sets while maximizing logistical efficiencies. Thank you. And for that, I know that I have the ability to be a leader, since that's what I've been doing for my entire life.
Okay, thank you. Our next candidate is Michael O'Connor.
Good evening, and thank you very much, Tamara. Thank you to the other candidates. It's a lot to put yourselves out to the community and run, and I appreciate that. It's been my great honor to serve as the mayor of the city of Frederick for the last 3.5 years, and we did that facing historic flooding in 2018, a global pandemic in 2020, racial unrest, and a new reckoning about what that meant for our community in the summer of 2020. And now, as we begin to emerge from the pandemic, now more than ever, we need to work together as a community. Despite all of those unexpected things, we managed to move forward on a number of important initiatives, from diversity and inclusion to a disparity study, to hiring a new police chief, to organizing a new Department of Housing and Human Services, to road projects, bikeways, new sidewalks, and investment in the West Side Regional Park, including a world-class destination playground and new ball fields coming this fall. We've got a lot of progress to show in the city of Frederick, and I appreciate your vote.
Thank you. Thank you. Our next candidate is Roger Wilson.
Thank you, Tamlin, and to Hood College and also the NAC coordinators who organized this discussion tonight. And thank you to my colleagues for participating in the discussion tonight. My name is Roger Wilson, and I'm an alderman in the city of Frederick. And I'm running for mayor because we've seen a lot of growth in our city over the last 20 years. When my wife and I moved here back in 1997, the population was about 43,000. Today it's doubled. It's close to more like 80,000. By 2045, it will be 100,000. And so we need that social infrastructure, not just the physical infrastructure, but the social infrastructure. I'm running because I want to get things done. We've been waiting far too long for things like a police headquarters, a downtown hotel conference center, stormwater management to get done. We need leadership. We need vision in the city. And I want to provide that leadership. So looking forward to thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, now we have been joined by our seventh candidate, Steve Garrahy.
Hi, I'm Steve Garrahy, and I'm running for the mayor's office of the city of Frederick. I believe in small businesses should be helped, especially after this pandemic. And also the small homeowners, because I've noticed a lot of old and dilapidated buildings. Maybe we could help them with some kind of fees and waiving permits. And also my big thing is, when somebody wants to come to town and protest or participate in any kind of protest, make sure they have proper permits and try and work with the police department and local services so everything can be free and fair. And I'm an active member of Frederick County Volunteer Fire and Rescue as a firefighter EMT, and also work with Tim May as a security investigator. So, and also worked as a kitchen manager for Lord. So I have some outside business interest. I have some business interests in the city, as well as working with fire and rescue and working with the homeless and drug addicted. So I think I have some great ideas for this wonderful city. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Very good. Okay, thank you. So I believe everyone has made an opening statement. I want to move now to our questions. There were 7 broad topic areas that residents who responded to the survey asked to be discussed. They included vacant properties, crime and public nuisance, flooding, development, livability, streets, traffic, and the role of the NACs. The candidates were provided with these topics as well as the specific questions that residents asked. And we've combined and generalized some questions to cover more ground, and we're going to get to as many of them as possible. So my first question is, many residents express a belief that violent crime is increasing in the city of Frederick, and they're concerned about it. Do you think that violent crime is increasing in Frederick? What are your plans to address violent crime and crime in general in the city? And our first respondent will be Ms. Doherty.
Well, there is an uptick in crime, and it's been obvious if you drive anywhere in the city that we are not seeing enough police coverage. True community policing is what I believe in, and also communicating to the public what is going on in our neighborhoods. The idea that we are learning on Facebook or social media where crime has occurred is not the proper mechanism for our police department and city hall to communicate to our residents. The reaction just 10 days ago for 3 shootings and in the downtown was a little late. We could see these things coming. I'm one of the few people in the world that actually hangs out in downtown almost every single night till midnight. The idea that I've had to adjust my operations just like residents have had to adjust their activities is wrong. The idea that we had a shooting at involving Fort Detrick, and we had 2 people end up being shot and 1 person getting inside the gates at Fort Detrick without any follow-up from our police department or our city hall. That's not proper. We should know the results of that. So like, this is a continuing theme with this administration on poor communication on what's going on. What we can do with the police department. Oh, there's one other thing. The mayor and the aldermen agreed to a contractual change for the police officers to work 12-hour shifts, hamstringing, I think, how the leadership of the police department can schedule when there's uptick in crime like we've seen. But true community policing is what I embrace and what I would push for working with the chief. The idea that patrol vehicles are important, but we also need to have police officers on foot and on bicycles so they can move around quickly. This is what stops crime. This is what residents are asking for. And the fact that we're not listening to it is a pretty big problem. The idea that everything's reactionary in this police department, or excuse me, in this city hall, in this administration, is a devastating indictment of openness in government and effectiveness in government. We have to make sure that the police department is able to take advantage of all the tools, technology, and communication skills to make sure they're getting information from residents and making sure they're giving information to residents and businesses. One of the other things that I've suggested for several years along the creek in downtown is to have a base of operations on Carroll Creek and to have a kiosk. Thank you. Sorry.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Very good. Okay, our next candidate who will speak to question 1 is Mr. Funderburk.
Hello, thank you. One thing I've noticed is that at our last debate, a lot of the other candidates had the same kind of solutions to the same problems. Every 4 years during election cycle, we hear the same solutions to the same problems, and the problems appear 4 years later. I propose new innovative solutions. For example, violent crime or crime that are felonious crime. That crime has been studied to be done by approximately just 3% of the population. So if you can target those 3% of the population, those small number of group of people that commit the same violent crime over and over and over again, as other small cities have done, you can drastically reduce the amount of violent crime in our city. So I propose a task force specifically targeting those few individuals that are creating a lot of the violent crime. Secondly, another innovative solution is to, free the police from nuisance calls or from calls that deal with people that have mental or emotional breakdowns. Those calls can be handled by mental health professionals. That has proved to be a less confrontational way and a more effective way to police our neighborhoods and police our streets, because a lot of police confrontations happen when someone has a mental or health or has a mental breakdown, or their health starts to break down some kind of way, and then they begin to react that way. And you need a mental health professional to be able to talk that person down and to be able to solve that situation non-violently. So I'm starting to hear the candidates with the same solutions. I propose innovative solutions so that we can solve this problem once and for all. So 4 years from now, we're not talking about violent crime. 4 years from now, we're not talking about the same things over and over again. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so our next candidate will be Mr. Garrahy.
Hi, yes, I was interested on that, and I'm kind of like what their current police chief had an idea with. I think it's going to be sound like pretty good to have a uniformed officer as well as a EMT, paramedic, and a crisis counselor / substance abuse counselor to go on all these, what they call nuisance calls, which I know because I've been a paramedic and I've seen how sometimes with drugs and alcohol, people can react, and maybe might need a police officer to stand by. But, and you know, up and down the streets, I kind of like to have the community policing was, you know, especially during summer times, going around Carroll Creek and up and down Market Street, make the president more visible. Now, patrol, the bikes, walk, and that's a couple other things. Yeah. And basically, you know, kind of keep an eye on the city. Borrow that New York slogan: if you see something, say something. Because if I would be mayor, I'd make sure I hear everybody's complaints, or, you know, if they have littering, loitering, any kind of complaints, I would always be responsive to their needs. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, our next candidate is Mr. Hamrick.
Hello. You know, I definitely agree with a lot of the good ideas that are out there, but the thought that it's just a theory that violent crime is on the rise it's actually just a fact. You know, based on the last 4 years, violent crime's up 34%. You were in Frederick, a victim of violent crime, 1 in 42. That's off the FBI statistical website. And I think that's pretty ridiculously unacceptable. So I go out and I've spoken to many police officers, law enforcement people that are on the beat, and they all say the same thing. All they want is more help. They need more tools, equipment, training. They need more of them because per capita, because the population is growing, there hasn't been an increase in police department structure. And so every single person I've seen, I've talked to a lot of them. I've been in many of meetings with these individuals, and they all say the same thing. You just can't keep working individuals 12 hours a day and expect them to be able to perform the same amount. And like, for example, downtown Frederick, I agree, people need to be on the beat. People being out at 2, 3 o'clock in the morning, drunk, walking down the streets, all they're doing is causing problems. And there's only so many of them to, you know, and to be in downtown Frederick and then have to go run calls all around the entire city. So I know, based on speaking with them, that they just need more financing. And that's just the bottom line. They just need more financing. And that's what they have said. That's not my opinion. That's just from talking to them. And if I don't know who else to ask, besides the people that are the professionals. So, I mean, that's really all I have to say about that. It's just, they said they need financing. So more police means less crime.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Hamrick.
Thank you.
Next is Mr. O'Connor.
Thank you very much. Anytime there's an incident of crime in a community, if you're the person who's the victim of that, the statistics don't matter because it's 100%. But the data says that Frederick is a safe community and has been a safe community for 20 years. And it goes back to Jennifer Doherty's hiring of Kim Dine. And that began a trend of the city of Frederick becoming a community with relatively low crime when you compare us to virtually any other community of the same size. And I'm proud of that. I'm proud of the police chief that we've hired, Jason Lando. In a very short period of time, he's made tremendous strides in some areas that we talked about a lot during the hiring process. One of those was this concept of how do we respond to mental health crisis in a way that doesn't necessarily put a uniform out in front. And just today, we announced the creation of a mobile crisis unit, a pilot program to assess a relationship between the city, the Mental Health Association, the Health Department, Shepherd, Pratt, Frederick County Fire and Rescue, and our Department of Housing and Human Services in an effort to make sure that we're learning the lessons of what the last year taught us. And that was that we do put a lot of pressure on police. We want, when we see something that doesn't look right, to be able to pick up the phone and know that an officer will respond. But what we also know is that a police officer in uniform may not always be the best first responder to every situation. So I'm not talking about how we can change and adapt. My administration is doing it. We're doing the things that need to be done to make this a safer community, to give our police department the resources that they need in order to be successful. We signed a 4-year contract with our Fraternal Order of Police a year ago. It's a tremendous investment, and it's a tremendous show of confidence in the administration to our officers and our officers to this city, that we know that for the next 4 years, we have a structure in place to make sure that our officers have the tools they need to be successful, because that's what our community needs as well.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. O'Connor. Mr. Wilson.
Yeah, thank you for the question. And public safety is a top priority of mine. We've heard the residents talk about the concern over public safety and what's been occurring downtown over the last couple of months, and actually before that they don't feel safe. And so what are we doing to react to that? One of the things that I want to focus on during my administration is investing in people and also investing in technology. I believe that we should have by now invested in cameras in high crime areas where our police can't be visible all the time. I think we need to take another look at hiring and making sure that we're hiring the best and the brightest in our police department. Also, I think we need to take a look at making sure that our police officers have the opportunity to live in the city in which they serve. Today, I think it was the 15 out of 140 or so sworn officers live in the city. And so that means that community policing, those relationships are not happening. And so what I want to do is reinvest in our police department and give them the opportunity to live in the city in which they serve, and thereby building relationships in the community, putting them back on the street, getting to know individuals and the residents in which they serve. I think that will go a long way. As far as reporting the crimes that are ongoing, I think there is a lack of transparency coming from City Hall. I think there needs to be more transparency so that residents know what's going on. Although we've been not able to meet in person with our NACs, we still have the ability to use technology to get the word out to our residents on what's happening in their communities. So 1, investing in people, 2, investing in technology.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. And last, Mr. Abbott.
I'll tell you what, you've got some politicians in this call for sure. What I just heard was pandering. They said, when a crime happens, the numbers don't matter because the crime happened. And then you proceed to go on and give us numbers about how, relatively speaking, there's not a lot of crime. Compared to who exactly? Maybe cities with like rampant crime, but tell you what, there's enough crime happening at an increasing rate to where people are concerned enough to ask the candidates for mayor. And so what I think we should do, for one, I've heard community policing thrown around a lot here. That's a brilliant idea. I don't know who is against community policing. What you can't have in community policing is someone at the head of your police not be from the community. There are plenty of wonderful candidates in this area. They don't have to live in the heart of the city. They can live in the general surrounding area with some investment in the community that knows some of the members. And I heard something about nuisances as well and social workers. That's a great idea. A lot of people of my generation, and yes, I'm young, I'm 20 years old. A lot of people of my generation are going to school for that very thing, for social work. There's going to be a lot of jobs. Another issue of my generation, people coming out of college without jobs. There's going to be a lot of people that we can hire to help take the burden off of our police, while also have community policing and just listening to the police. Whatever they say, I'll give you a perfect example. I understand that our sheriff is very controversial, but I'm not worried about controversy. I'm worried about keeping people safe. And he'll straight up tell you, with this 287G program, we've arrested trained snipers off of our streets. People are coming here trained in guerrilla warfare and sniping, and we're arresting these people off the streets with this program. It's a wonderful thing, and we need to support it. There's a lot of things that we can do while not paying attention to the politics, paying attention to the community and keeping people safe that we aren't doing, that it would take no more effort than is already being done to accomplish.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much, everyone. We're going to move on to our second question. And this one is about development. And so question 2 is, what are your general plans for addressing development, particularly around the perceived overdevelopment of Frederick? One question that a resident posed was whether the candidates would support a public advocate position outside of City Hall to better represent the interests of residents and better balance the influence of the development community and residents. Would you support a public advocate for this purpose? And so if you could kind of comment on the public advocate idea, as well as just general plans for development. And the first person I'd like to respond to this question is Mr. Funderburk.
I would not support a separate advocacy because honestly, the people that you elect should represent your values. To have another advocacy board or have a group of people that aren't elected or aren't chosen by the community to have that stronger voice seems to me like a bad idea. Secondly, my plans as administration is to move Frederick forward. And my primary reason for running for Frederick is that we need to have a convention center and luxury hotel in Frederick. We also need to have a national art museum, and we also need to have bike paths that go from our communities all the way to downtown. We need more dog parks. Frederick is not overdeveloped. Frederick has grown, and when the population grows, you have to have an infrastructure that grows with it. And with the infrastructure that grows with it, you also have to have the amenities. And amenities that most large cities like Frederick has. Frederick is Maryland's second largest city. They have art museums, they have convention centers, they have luxury hotels, they have a nightlife where people can come and spend our hard-earned dollars right here in the community, that we don't have to go to DC or to Baltimore to enjoy a evening out with our significant other. So my plans for Frederick, number one, which is on my website, votejohnformayor.com, is to bring a convention center, a luxury hotel to Frederick, cut through the red tape and get it done. Secondly, is to have smart development, increase bike paths are amazing. Frederick is a heavy biking community, and our city isn't that big. So we should have ways to get to downtown. It would alleviate traffic. It will also promote health and also have more dog parks. So not only should we develop commercial projects, we should also develop projects that create our living better as well. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, our next responder to this question is Mr. Garrahy.
Yes, I believe in trying to put as much development in there. But the other thing I'd like to look at is, the schools around the area, the roads, and we'll take city services. And there's a lot of good arts and rec. Look at the Frederick Arts Center and the Weinberg. We've got quite a few need to start supporting them a little more. Maybe have people getting out, and now that COVID's over, hopefully people getting out and putting on more events, and maybe do during the weekend do more events at Baker Park, like some local artists or some from neighboring counties. And yeah, we also do need a good convention center, but I could see that coming. But right on Patrick Street, would the road be able to handle all the traffic for major conventions? And my biggest thing is we can have a convention center, but if I would be there, no taxpayer money would be used. It would be all private. Could understand commandants, a couple others. So I can welcome that and just make sure there are plenty of roads, parking, and other facilities and amenities, and like some more bike paths. But as long as we regulate the growth and keep it regulated, don't let it get wild. So that's all I have.
Okay, thank you. Okay, our next candidate is Mr. Hamrick.
Yes, so I definitely agree that we should not have an unelected individual, gaining influence on the community. It's kind of like counterindicative of having an elected official. But that being said, as far as like the development of the city, I don't know if anyone's ever driven in the city before, but traffic has just gotten really terrible, especially coming up 270, 15, where it joins on to 70. It's terrible all the time, but then we continually have a lot more residential neighborhoods going up all over the place. For example, like right behind Butterfly Lane, all along Ballinger Creek is just a disaster. And I feel like we need to hire legitimate civil engineers that know what they're doing, so that way we can increase the flow of traffic. Because if you can't get anywhere, how you're supposed to be able to use any of the city buildings like arts and arts museums, anything pretty much in downtown areas, like a gridlock after 3 o'clock in the afternoon. So I think that we need to focus on traffic management before we really focus on building the community up anymore, because you can't really even utilize what we have because you can't get there. And it's very stressful to pretty much everyone, at least that I've ever spoken to. So I guess that's pretty much all I have, as well as just expanding our road infrastructure and making it more efficient overall, because I know there's lots of room to grow.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Hamrick. Our next candidate is Mr. O'Connor.
This is probably the most challenging issue that you have to deal with at the local level, because as the old adage says, if you're not growing, you're dying. And so growth is part of what it means to be in a city. As mayor, I want the growth to be in the city of Frederick. I would much rather have that growth sitting in the city than sitting at Spring Ridge or Ballinger Creek or Westview, developments that pay enormous taxes to the county, but don't pay anything to the city. And yet all of the people that work or live in those communities are on our roads, using our parks, in our services. They also visit our businesses. They also come to our downtown. And so this balance, this tension that exists between growth, it's a bit of an irony. I grew up in Frederick. I've seen this community. I was born here and have seen the community change over years. There's a number of candidates who are here on this call to talk about what they want to do about growth and how it ought to change, who all came here from someplace else, because we have a high quality of life. What we need to do from a growth and development standpoint is continue to invest in the infrastructure to make sure that we fight for the dollars that we can get for Route 15. And it's been a challenge to work with the state to get them to recognize the value of this project. We're working with our federal delegation. Congressman Trone was here a couple of weeks ago touring that project. And we're very hopeful that with the congressionally directed spending that has been implemented, we may see some movement on this. We have to make an investment in bike paths, a shared use path system in our local roads, and making sure that the infrastructure that we can control and that we can build is adequate to serve these developments as they come. And we've got the growth policies in place to do that. As far as a public advocate position, I don't know enough about it to say. I think that is what the elected officials are supposed to do. It's what our planning commission is here for. They're supposed to be representing residents in the process.
Thank you. Our next candidate is Mr. Wilson.
Yes, this is a great question because this is the reason why I got into public service. because I saw the growth. My wife and I live off of 26, and we saw the growth coming, and now we have no infrastructure. The roads are crowded, and what used to take 15 minutes or so to go to the grocery store, to Wegmans, for example, now takes 45 minutes. You literally have to plan your day. What's happening is in the city, yes, the mayor is right. We do need to grow in the city, and we expect that growth. I want growth, but I also want infrastructure to support that growth. We need to do a better job at holding our partners, our development partners, accountable. They need to support putting in place infrastructure. It's wrong to have developers come into our community and not be able to be held accountable for putting infrastructure in place. It's wrong to ask taxpayers to do that. Our roads are crowded. We can do a better job at making sure that we grow smartly. As far as a public advocate goes, I'm open to the idea. What that tells me is that the system is broken, that we're not holding our elected officials who are supposed to do and provide that role and responsibility. So yes, I would be open to having a public advocate to support whatever needs there are in the community.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Wilson. Next is Mr. Abbott.
To the question of the public advocate, I just don't understand why you wouldn't support having another public advocate. That's the entire focus of my campaign, is the advocacy of the community, which I feel is lacking. I think the fact that that's even a question is honestly absurd, that people feel like there's not enough advocacy going on in their city government. But leave it up to the politicians to say, I love development because it brings in more money. But I think the development that I would like to bring, some very specific things. I think there's a lot of untapped musical potential, especially among the youth community here in Frederick. And I would like to bring music studios, for example, so that people can really tap into that. We have all cultures here. It's an amazing thing. We've got, country music, Latino music, hip hop, you name it, we got it. And we should be doing more to give people a platform to express themselves in such a lovely city like this. Another thing I'd like to bring a marijuana dispensary to downtown Frederick. I think, frankly, we are behind the curve when it comes to that. I know we've got some in the county, but I know of a lot of people that would really love that. And it'd be good for business. I don't know what is hungrier than a person who just got done smoking. So people are going to come to this dispensary, do their thing, and buy some pizza pretzel or flaming pizza. That's the extent of what I have to say on this issue.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Abbott. And our last candidate to respond to this question is Ms. Doherty.
I think this question was about growth, overdevelopment, and public advocacy. So does the city grow too much, too fast? It doesn't grow too much, but it does impact residents because the city isn't keeping up with the capital projects. The idea that we are behind on the completion of Christopher's Crossing is one of the things that will help alleviate traffic congestion through the city, because the internal traffic can use the ring road. But Christopher's Crossing is currently put in the comp plan with a note. It's supposed to be built over Area B11 at Fort Detrick. This is a dangerous option, and we have to stand up and make sure that when we are constructing our infrastructure, we have done adequate environmental review and assessment, making sure that we are not putting people and property at risk. The other part of the question is, who is better to manage growth? Who has stood up and made sure that we are delivering on infrastructure? Sadly, I made a few adversaries when I was mayor because I put a moratorium on annexations and building because we didn't have adequate water supply. multiple projects and multiple years later, we saw that alleviation of the water problem. And I know that Michael just announced with the county executive Gardner, the Lake Linganore dredging success. Well, that's been on the books for 12 years, and we're just getting it completed. That kind of delay is why people are frustrated. That kind of delay is why we're not celebrating the popularity of Frederick, but we're frustrated by being stuck in traffic and not being able to do the things that we like to do. Clover Ridge community is complaining about park construction. The money is there. Why isn't it being completed? This is the type of thing that people complain about. This is why they think that the overdevelopment has occurred, because we're not keeping up. This is the kind of thing that why people clamor for a public advocate. I don't think a public advocate is good for the development issues because they're controlled by state law. But when I was mayor, we did have an ombudsman who helped negotiate using calm techniques to make sure that people were getting along when they had internal strife. Sorry, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much, candidates. We're going to move on to the third question, and this one is connected to the other one, but it's about vacant properties downtown. So the question is this: many are concerned about vacant properties downtown and vacant houses in the neighborhoods. What are your plans for addressing vacant properties in the city? Can you give us a sense of your timeline for addressing this issue? And our first person to respond to this will be Mr. Garrahy.
Yes. I live right off South Street, so I see a lot of this. I walk up and down town, and I think most of the burden is not on the owner, but the city, because they keep putting on fines and levies. So maybe work with find out who the owner is and see if they can work with them. Kind of work with the property owners. I've seen a lot of good, because I've heard about this other place. And so I think it's just trying to work with the residents and maybe waive some fees, see what we can do to help get the city back in town. Because there's I noticed a lot of drug addicts and homeless and kind of like hanging out there, and it can be a real safety hazard, especially in the wintertime. So having the mayors and the aldermen kind of put their heads together and work on this and try to do our best and, do our best with their best interest, because that's what the mayor and the aldermen are for, to represent the city, take their complaints and see what they need, see what we can do as elected officials and make sure that everybody's happy and, figure out a happy medium. That's all I have.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Our next candidate to answer this question is Mr. Hamrick.
Yes. First, I think that it's important to develop like some degree of a census to how bad it really is. And then, like Mr. Garrahy was saying, from what I understand, a lot of those vacant houses are owned by people that don't even live in the city, that actually just want them to retain their vacancy for whatever reason. So if we could definitely work with whoever owns that to, repurpose that building and reutilize it and give it back to the community or sell it instead of letting it be vacant, that would be the best way to do it. And he said the only way you can do it, if some piece of property is personally owned by somebody, you can only, if they're paying their taxes, what are you going to do if they decide to leave it vacant? So you can only work with them. So I think that's really very limited on choices. So thank you.
Okay, thank you. All right, thank you. Our next candidate is Mr. O'Connor.
So vacant properties are something that we've made a concerted effort to try and address through two things that this administration has done. Number one, we have added habitual vacancy to the list of reasons that a property can be taken via receivership. So it allows us to use the power of the city to move a property into the hands of someone who, for whatever reason, doesn't want to respond to the market forces that are at work. The other thing that we have done is created a vacant property registry. So to Mr. Hamrick's point, if you're trying to understand the census, this vacant property registry is going to allow us to really get an assessment of the property. Cool. There's a market dynamic that's at work here. Harbor Freight, Ollie's, the new Goodwill building out on the Golden Mile all moved into the Kmart when it left. Warehouse Cinemas has opened up now at the old Fredericktown Mall, along with Taj Mahal and Frederick Furniture Store. We've seen Big Lots come in and replace the Toys R Us. We saw the Common Market occupy the empty Safeway property. So some properties move very quickly from vacancy to occupancy, but others don't. They've got bad landlords or bad owners. Anyone sitting on vacant residential property right now has not taken a look at where the residential property market is right now. No property sits on the residential market for sale very long unless whoever owns that property doesn't want to sell it. Our job in the city is to make sure that properties are well maintained, that we hold them to a standard of code enforcement, that we do not allow vacant properties become degrading infrastructure on neighborhoods. And we're committed to that as well. We have to be balanced and focused in that to make sure that we're not targeting properties, but that we treat every vacant property, every neighborhood the same as we work to do this. Our administration is making commitments to vacant properties, and we'll hopefully be helped as the market continues to support these efforts also.
Thank you, Mr. O'Connor. Our next speaker on this question is Mr. Wilson.
Yes, thank you. This has been a frustrating item for me as a legislator in the city. You know, almost 7 months ago, we passed an ordinance to deal with vacant and blighted property. Where's the enforcement? You know, that's what I'm asking. My colleagues and I worked very hard to get this legislation passed to address the issues that have been present, I would say 20 years. I think one specific property was there during the Doherty administration. So what are we doing to deal with this blighted property? The alderman passed over 7 months ago a new ordinance to establish a vacant registry, to levy fees and property taxes on vacant properties. So what are we doing? We can pass all the laws we want, but we need a mayor and executive to enforce those laws. So that's my question.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Wilson. The next candidate.
It's really too bad that Alderman Wilson didn't read the legislation that he passed, because he should know what the deadlines are on that bill.
Sorry, Mr. O'Connor. Sorry.
What are the rules at?
Who's that speak? Okay, we're going to stay in order. And our next speaker is Mr. Abbott.
Yeah, what Roger said was actually brilliant. The fact of the matter is, like, we passed the resolution. Where's the enforcement of it? I think we all got a little mad when it happened. Okay. Anyways, since it's my turn, I think I'll
Mr. O'Connor, we're gonna stick with the order of speakers. Okay. Thank you.
I think we should read the law, and I think we should also enforce the law. I think the vacant property registration is a wonderful thing that requires some enforcement. I think also it takes some innovation. I mentioned in the previous question that I had some very specific ideas for what we can do, namely the music production and the marijuana dispensary and things of that nature. But also what the mayor did have to say about cycling is true. It just might take a little bit of time now, given that we're coming out of the pandemic. But I think if we have a little patience and stick together as a community and really enforce what we got, this is an issue that is not going to be as hard as it's been during this administration.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Abbott. Our next speaker is Ms. Doherty.
Thank you. During the past 12 years as alderman and mayor, Michael said that they were getting serious about blighted and vacant properties. They needed more staff, so they hired 3 more people. They needed more laws. They adopted 2 versions of receivership, and you just heard about some updates, but this was to put bad property owners in the penalty box. This year, they adopted a law that doubles the property taxes if the property owner fails to make good faith efforts to rehab and fill properties with legitimate use. But they are reactive and random in their enforcement. They are inconsistent in the levy of fines, and they are tone deaf in dealing with the public, even making people who make complaints the enemy. My approach is different, and as much as you want to challenge it, it was successful. I have used the existing laws of condemnation and eminent domain for the city to take two properties, 20 West 4th Street and the Delphi property on West Patrick Street. One was relatively simple, and one was very complicated because of subsequent administration literally dropped the ball, dropped the lawsuit. I will use a code enforcement board to hear cases and take the politics out of enforcement. And I will use the NACs to make this initiative citywide, because properties are not just in the downtown. And I will bring a condemnation and reuse plan for the most flagrant violators to the Board of Aldermen for action within our first 100 days of being in office. That to me is the difference. I'm giving you a timeline. I'm telling you what we're going to do, and it will be up to the legitimate vote of the Board of Aldermen. This is not a secret, what I think. I will take the action to bring it to the Board of Aldermen for a vote. I got a successful vote with a quite recalcitrant board in the past, and I would hope to have that same support again, because the public is demanding it. Action, not just more legislation piled upon more legislation.
Thank you. Okay, and our last speaker on this question is Mr. Funderburk.
First, I'd like to thank Roger Wilson and the aldermen, the other aldermen, for passing that legislation. Is much needed. This situation really was the impetus of me thinking about my political career. As a small business owner, I was looking for property in downtown Frederick to possibly rent out. And I kept coming across blighted property after blighted property after blighted property. And part of my frustration hearing all of you speak, with the exception of Roger Wilson, that has passed legislation, is that I keep hearing the same thing over and over again, and that property is still there. I heard Jennifer Doherty say she was successful in her term, but she mentioned 2 properties that she was able to get off the market, just 2. That's not successful to me. I hear our mayor say he has all these things in the works, but the property is still there. We have to do something about it. Enough of the constant being able to have excuse after excuse after excuse, legislation, red tape, legislation, red tape. In the first 100 days, I would get together with the aldermen and with the other city leaders and come out with legislation that is rock solid, that can eliminate all the blighted properties, especially downtown, where we have a significant increase in retail, and addressing the blighted properties in our neighborhoods. That is also an eyesore, and it's also causing our communities to have less, it lowers the property value. So the solution is to come out of the ivory tower and walk among the people and get it done. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, candidates, for answering that question about vacant properties. We're going to move to our next question, and this one is about flooding. The flooding of businesses and homes in and around downtown is perceived by many residents to be an ongoing issue. As we face climate change, please tell us your plan to fix the issue of flooding in Frederick. And if you could give us both short-term and long-term kind of goals and plans about flooding in Frederick. And our first candidate to respond to this will be Mr. Hamrick.
I think first of all, it'd be appropriate to get a legitimate survey of the flow of water, because obviously the city streets of Frederick are a conduit to downtown Frederick. So if there's construction going on or development going on, it could be potentially affecting the downtown area based on this issue. It might be appropriate to, get some numbers on how much water is flowing in that direction from certain areas, and that way it can be addressed. If we got to do additional drainage or modify streets, it's to that way we can move water towards Carroll Creek or towards the water processing plant, whatever we need to do. I don't think it would be that difficult to get that information and move on with a legitimate plan to make downtown Frederick not be flooded anymore. So I think that would be pretty much the easiest solution, is just get the data.
Okay. Okay, thank you, Mr. Hamrick. Our next candidate is Mr. O'Connor.
First of all, I want to apologize to my fellow candidates. I'm somebody that doesn't like to not play by the rules, and I was disrespectful, and for that, I apologize. I knew coming into this that it was going to be 6 against 1. And so just being outnumbered, I just have to remember that. Mr. Hamrick, that's exactly what the city has done. We contracted with the Army Corps of Engineers to look at 4 flood areas in the city of Frederick, significant ones impacted by the flood in 2018. What the Army Corps did for the city of Frederick was create models that could estimate the amount of rainfall that would create impacts over certain geographies. And with those models, then we could make a determination about what is the infrastructure change that we need to make in those areas in order to address flooding under certain conditions. The first of those projects, the highest priority one, was Mater Avenue. The budget that takes effect on July 1st includes the funding to do the design, engineering, and construction and move those projects forward. We'll move very rapidly on the other 3 project areas. We have a 5th one, which is downtown. And these are also projects which the city submitted for congressionally directed spending in the hope that we can get federal funds to assist us with this as well. So this administration, when the flooding hit in 2018, moved immediately to address this issue. I wish these processes could all be condensed to days, but they cost money and they cost time. But I will tell you, my administration on this issue is working as fast as humanly possible to get this done. And anyone who tells you they can do it faster is pandering in an election year.
Thank you, Mr. O'Connor. Our next candidate is Mr. Wilson to speak about this issue of flooding.
Yes, I have nothing more to add than what the mayor just described. The only thing that's missing in there is being transparent and being informative to the community of what's happening. What's the timeline on that kind of fixing those infrastructure issues that are not just downtown, but throughout the city? These stormwater management issues are going to continue to get bigger if we don't get on these issues right now. There is a money issue. I would like the administration to be more transparent to the public on what those budget issues are. And I would just like more aggressive timeline to kind of fix these problems. But stormwater management is a big issue in the city, and residents need to know how big they are.
Thank you, Mr. Wilson. Our next candidate is Mr. Abbott.
I agree with candidate Stephen Hamrick had to say about surveying the flow of water, knowing where it goes. I think there's a lot of listening to the experts on this specific issue, really. And I'm not entirely sure how much faith or confidence I have in what the mayor is saying, and that we're getting this done as quickly as possible. When I can think of a handful of things that I think are distracting that particular goal. I thought the 611 comment was cute, but the fact of the matter is we're running for mayor, and I don't think you yourself are someone who is particularly above coming for people. I think something that might, in fact, be getting in the way of this flooding issue are things such as political witch hunts against political opponents on baseless claims, frankly. I think if we focus on the issue and listen to the community, we would be able to address these in a much more efficient manner, as opposed to doing whatever it can or whatever we can to ensure that we stay in office.
Thank you, Mr. Abbott. Our next candidate is Ms. Doherty.
Thank you. Downtown flooding is not just limited to the 2018 event. There was a flood in 2016 and there's one in 2017. I have the pictures. I have the pictures because downtown floods and I live and work downtown. We are glad that the mayor and the aldermen have brought in the Army Corps of Engineers. They identified 5 projects and did work on 4 of them, excluding the downtown. Mater Avenue, 713,000, says the Army Corps of Engineers. The current CIP says 1.3 million. Klein Boulevard, 750,000. The Dietrich grant, 794,000. West Patrick Street, 851,000. So maybe we have 3 million, maybe we have $5 million in projects. These floods have been going on long enough. And you're right, it does take time to design and engineer the solutions, but it doesn't take 5 years. The idea that we can't find $3 to $5 million to help alleviate the problems that are facing residents and businesses who can't use their basements, who have to sandbag their doors when a storm comes, and who don't get the full use of their properties and have to invest in supersonic sump pumps. I mean, this is real. These projects are real. People move out of areas because it's impactful on them. The YMCA spent over $1 million putting in their flood control plans. That's money that could be used elsewhere. This is wrong. And Michael, you were in office as an alderman. You were in my business. I showed you video yourself. You can't deny that. The idea that the city is not addressing this and communicating with residents, telling them the timeline. I would change one thing with all the other issues is I would make sure that every time we have a serious storm, we have someone designated from the city of Frederick to go around and assess the current situation and to make sure everyone is okay. We are losing money and we are ignoring our infrastructure responsibilities. That is serious, and that is the fundamental function of government. Infrastructure, providing services, making sure people are safe. And if we are not doing that, we are failing. And this administration is allowing things to languish.
Okay, all right, thank you. Okay, our next candidate is Mr. Funderburk.
Yes, thank you. I want to address the 6-in-1 comment. I mean, honestly, if you can't handle a virtual debate and with 6 people, then how can you lead this city when times really get tough? That's just, I'll say that there. Concerning flooding, Frederick isn't the only city that floods. I spent 3 years in the South, in New Orleans, Mississippi, and Florida, and all these cities have creative, innovative solutions. Why aren't we seeing what other cities are doing? If flooding is a recent phenomenon in the last 20 years, why aren't we going with cities that have dealt with this for over 100 years, over 150 years? I mean, solutions are out there. There's no reason to reinvent the wheel. All we have to do is to bring in innovative solutions with cities that are already doing it, finding out what they're doing successful, and apply it to Frederick. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, and our last speaker on this topic is Mr. Garrahy.
Yes, yeah, I'd like to agree with Mr. Doherty about that, because we do need somebody to identify the real floodplain areas, like where the China Garden, Frederick High School, that every time we get heavy rain, that's the lake and up and down Market Street, have somebody kind of monitor the situation. And plus, I was in Ellicott City back in 2015, 2016, where they had their 2 floods, and see how they handled it. And work with others, work with other city leaders, and I'm sure that other places in the county see how they've handled it. So I know that it takes a long time. Maybe if we start getting more aggressive with it and finding out who we can call, and maybe start asking like the state and the county to help out. And I get the Army Corps of Engineers, maybe some local engineers like from other areas that have received flooding on a regular basis. So maybe if we could have a city county cooperation, maybe with state, who knows? Because I know flooding is always going to be a problem. And so if we can address these issues and find their major areas and reduce the flow waters, so that's and reduce flood waters and identify the hotspots. Get some kind of plan together so we can maybe not take it away, but eliminate it, make it better, so people won't have the sandbag in their place, or worrying about floods. Am I gonna have to do this? That's all I have.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Garrahy. Okay, we're going to move to our next question. And this one is about traffic and intersections in the city. So residents are concerned about traffic and intersections in the city and safety for motorists and pedestrians. How will you work to improve the traffic congestion that stems from growth in both the city and the county? And our first candidate to respond to this question will be Mr. O'Connor.
Thank you. As has been referenced before, infrastructure at the local level really is the core of what it is that we do. And so as you have that growth, you're going to continue to see those pressures. We're in constant evaluation of intersections that may need to be changed, upgraded, or improved. It's a data-driven process. It's based on engineering standards that are used nationwide in communities all over the place. You measure traffic counts, you look at the geometry of intersections, you try and determine whether or not you need to make changes that are necessary in order to create an intersection that is safer. At the end of the day, that's the goal. The goal is safety. We want intersections that are safe. We want intersections that can be traversed easily by pedestrians, by bicyclists, by motor vehicles. The operation that we initiated several months ago, Operation Safe Speed, was intended to allow us to, in one respect, better assess where the concerns were coming from, and then to be able to appropriately direct those concerns into whether or not they were about enforcement. Do we simply need to put more police in places to get traffic to respond? Or do we need to refer them to our engineering department and actually look at whether or not intersections need to be changed or re-engineered? One of the areas of concern it's been referenced this evening is Christopher's Crossing. The Board of Aldermen will be asked next Thursday night to award a contract to construct the traffic light at Christopher's Crossing and Possumtown Pike. We will continue to do everything that's necessary in order to move these kinds of transportation projects, because at the local level, at the street level, at the neighborhood level, whether it was widening Catoctin Avenue with some striping in order to get traffic to slow down, or putting in stop sign, that's local government at work.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. O'Connor. Our next candidate is Mr. Wilson.
Yes, thank you. This has been an important issue for me, especially sidewalks, installation and repair, and crosswalks. I am a huge advocate of pedestrian safety. I worked very hard on the Butterfly Lane route to make sure that sidewalks that didn't exist, that they were put in place, installed, and that pedestrians had a safe pathway, especially for our students, had a safe pathway to Butterfly Ridge School there. But the mayor just described something to me and reminded me something of a debate he and I had maybe like 3 years ago. And what I advocated for was a more proactive government as opposed to reactive. This is an example of what we're hearing from the NACs and what they're telling us. And when we visit these NAC meetings, they're telling us these are the things that we need. We are reacting. We should be in front of that. We should be out there in the community identifying these things. When it comes to road improvements, we know where the trouble areas are. I mean, US 15, for example, through the city, that's been our top priority for a number of years now. And so we're not being proactive. We're not going after these issues in a proactive way. And I want to change the culture in City Hall. That's why we need a strong mayor here in Frederick.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Wilson. Our next candidate is Mr. Abbott.
I think on this issue, it's going to take a lot of listening to the community. Something as simple as, do you think there should be this here? How do you feel about this light? Or what do you think about this camera? Things of that nature. But I think really this issue is being exacerbated by the development and a lot of people moving in and just, more bodies creating more traffic. And, we live in the DMV. So part of this traffic issue is going to almost be unavoidable, but at the very least, we can listen to the community and work with experts, frankly, and not get sidetracked with just silly things and just waste of money. That we can, like I said, at the very least, alleviate some of the the inevitable problems that come with growth of a city that's in the DMV area.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Abbott. Our next candidate is Ms. Doherty.
One of the first things I did when I was elected in 2001, took office in 2002 in those days, was break out a project and decide that we needed to get some things accomplished quickly. And one of the things I was hearing at the neighborhood roundtables was that speeding, particularly around schools, was a significant problem. So it was our administration that instituted speed bumps and traffic calming circles. And sometimes it wasn't met with great success, but the neighbors generally loved it. They loved it because it did slow down traffic. We really haven't seen any speed or traffic calming circles or speed bumps put in any neighborhood since then. The idea that we're not listening to residents will change if I'm elected, because I'll do the annual walk around with the NAC leaders in their community, identifying projects. We'll do breakout projects like we did working with the county and the state on the northbound ramp from Route 26 to US 15. That was a breakout project, part of the 40-year-long US 15 improvements. We are watching two generations of people see US 15 expand, and yet still we have no traffic, no traffic relief. We have to do something more on mass transit. We never talk about mass transit in these options. One of the things that we tried to talk about is expanding the ability to get to the MARC train. If we require everyone on the west side of town to drive across 15 and get to the two MARC train stations, we're creating additional congestion. So maybe we're running shuttle buses from the west side of town where the shopping malls are, where the parking is full, or which is completely available, to make sure that there are other options. The idea that Christopher's Crossing is a panacea isn't true, but go back to the traffic light issue. That's been approved for over a year. That should have been completed over a year ago. So why is it just coming to a vote now? Again, this delay on infrastructure is what's causing frustration. That is why people are going to turn out and vote this time and vote for change.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Mr. Funderburk.
Thank you. I wish we could have a rebuttal, because I think Ms. Doherty said that that she came to office in 2002 and there hasn't been speed bumps since then put in the city. I'm not sure if we really meant that or not, but that seems to be kind of ludicrous. Secondly, but I'm glad she did mention mass transit. Frederick is uniquely kind of formed, whereas I feel, first of all, let me go back to the original question. I feel that some things need innovative solutions. Some things need, we're not the first city that have problems with traffic. How do other cities handle problems with traffic? All we have to do is follow, instead of reinventing the wheel, follow what works best. And mass transit, but we also had to have local transit. Frederick is uniquely built where you have entire neighborhoods in clusters. If you had an express bus that go from my neighborhood directly to downtown every half an hour, that would alleviate traffic. You can have one that goes from the area of 26 to downtown. You can have one that goes from the other side of 15 to downtown. You can have one that goes to Ballinger Creek to downtown and back. And that would just increasing public transportation alleviates traffic. It's a tried and true solution. And in addition to that, we also need to increase our bike paths. A lot of people bike in Frederick, and Frederick isn't that big. If we had a bike path to go from 26 to downtown, once again, in Clover Hill to downtown, and Ballinger Creek to downtown and back, and that bleeds into safety. One reason, if I try to bike from my house to downtown, half the route I have to take my life in my hands because the bike path stopped. And I have to literally travel on crowded streets such as 26 that doesn't have a designated area. They say it's designated, but the cars fly by you 70 miles an hour and don't think it's designated. So I think we need dedicated bike paths, express local transit that can go from the neighborhoods to downtown, and that would greatly alleviate traffic. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Next is Mr. Garrahy.
Yes, I've been county resident for quite a few years, not like I'm in the city, but I think we're we're closing the barn after the horses already left, because we should have been looking at this a long time ago, like the early 90s, 2000s, you know, when they were putting developments in, looking at the roads. Because I live, like I said, I live around West South Street, and I'm looking at one of the major intersections where you got Center and Bench, where I've seen many, many accidents, and they got one-way, I mean, they got one-way sign, they got stop cameras, they got everything, and people just, so it's pretty bad. And I'm just waiting for one time where somebody pops over the hill of Center Street, coming up, someone going the other way, or you have a serious head-on. And maybe do need to have traffic engineers come out. And this issue should have been tackled a long time ago when they were starting developments in cities and other parts, because this is an ongoing problem, and especially with speed zones and people just speeding up and down the roads. I remember when Commissioner Hoke tried to put Hoke ropes in, and that didn't seem to work. People just didn't care. So we need rumble strips or a city or somebody that knows what they're doing, because this is, like I said, I'm in the city county resident in '98. I've seen the city grow, but not provide for proper roads and different paths and transit. That'd be a good idea. But we need to have people start using it, because I've seen a lot of buses go at almost empty or maybe one or two riders. So there's some way we can entice the riders to use transit and figure out another way, because this is a long foregone issue that's have been plaguing the city for as long as I've been around. That's all.
Okay, thank you. And our last candidate to speak about this issue about traffic and intersections in the city is Mr. Hamrick.
Yes. So Mr. Roger Wilson, so you're the individual I have to blame for Butterfly Lane. Seriously, hopefully, we can fire whoever gave you the plans you signed off on, because whoever thought it was a good idea to shut down Butterfly Lane, which parallels 40, and put in 5 traffic lights, you cut off one half of my community. I can't get into it anymore. And then there's a bunch of houses going up right behind me. You can tell I'm obviously upset about this. So, I mean, like, decisions like that are the problem. That is exactly the problem. Every day, my life is ruined because of that. Just saying, we can't have decisions like that without speaking to the rest of the community.
Okay.
So that's it. You just can't have poor planning like that. It affects everybody.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you, candidates, for discussing that question about traffic and intersections. And I think we're going to move to our closing statements. So I would like for each person to take a minute to give us some closing words. And you had all of the questions that the residents asked. Wanted to know, you saw them, you see questions in the Q&A. There are a couple of questions there. So if you want to talk about any of that, if you want to rebut, have a time to rebut something, Mr. Funderburk, you can do it here. But here are our closing statements. And so we're going to go in the order that I'm going to specify. Our first person to make closing statements is Mr. Wilson.
Thank you for the opportunity to talk a little bit about my vision for the city and why I want to be mayor. Frederick is a special place because of its history, its commerce, its people. I've spent much of my adult life here in Frederick, 24 years. I've invested a lot of time and effort in volunteering, being an elected official, of course, working in my community and trying to solve problems and working with people. I spent about 20 years at IBM. I spent 6 years in Frederick County government. I ran a small business. So I have the experience. I want to be mayor. I want the opportunity to serve my community. Frederick is growing. We do need a leader with vision, and we need a leader that's not only transactional, but transformational. I want to be that leader. Ask for your vote. Please continue to follow my campaign at rogerforfrederick.com. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next candidate is Mr. Abbott.
I think a lot of what we've seen during this Zoom call was just frankly a lot of politics, a lot of politician answers, a lot of rhetoric, and a lot of dancing, frankly. A lot of, oh, we're doing this, we're doing that. But like I said earlier, the fact that it's a question really begs the question of whether or not what you're doing is enough. I think a lot of what people know of from their city government are a failure at redesigning a logo, at putting up, modern art, Carroll Creek, political witch hunts, things like that, that nobody really cares too much for. I think really issues that are plaguing our community, even some that we didn't talk about, like the drug epidemic, which is the biggest issue of my campaign. We didn't talk about that today. I think really the voters that are watching this are going to leave this with a lot of questions regarding how they feel about the current politicians that are in there representing us today. And hopefully they'll see that when the ballot box, when we count the votes from the ballot box, I will see that there's a lot of people who are very dissatisfied with incumbents and even past incumbents at that, who've had the opportunity and have just done nothing but disappoint.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Abbott. Next, Ms. Doherty.
Thank you. And thanks to the NACS and Hood College for doing this. NACS, you didn't get your question in, and go to the website, jenniferformayor.com, and we'll talk about touring the NACS at the first month of the new administration, recruiting new members in underrepresented NACS, organizing a citywide NAC Congress, establishing a schedule for the CIPs to get to the NACS, bringing election reform to the NACS, because I want to make sure that we have voting districts for the aldermen so that they are more representative in our neighborhoods, and term limits for our elected officials. And I also want to reschedule the community roundtables, Frederick 101, and talk about the new initiatives on Next Generation and the Lunar Society and the Civilian Conservation Corps. We didn't get to those things. We did get to talk about a few things. And we talk about leadership. Leadership comes with dealing with a water crisis or a pandemic. Simple issues like traffic or development. Simple issues that are not being handled by this mayor. It was referenced. We spent time discussing replacing our beloved clustered spires with a new logo, hiring a consulting firm to help improve diversity in hiring and contracting, but still appoints 5 white men to the Ethics Commission. This is not good leadership. And in the last election, as I mentioned, only 3,000 people voted. What are we talking about here? We're talking about people who don't know the process on running government, don't know the process of running a business. And this is about listening to residents and then getting something done. It's a 2-step process. So this is a quality of life issue. So I want you to check out my ideas. You can see a previous debate that addresses other issues of economic development, housing affordability on my website, jenniferformayor.com. And know this, if you elect me, I give a shit and I will get stuff done for you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Our next candidate is Mr. Funderburk.
Sometimes I wish I had Jennifer Doherty's eloquence of speaking, because she makes it sound so amazing. But then when you actually look at the facts, it's quite different. I want to get things done. I have an innovative way, innovative solutions. But in addition to that, I'm a huge believer in, why are we trying to reinvent the wheel? Frederick isn't the first city to have these problems. And why are we addressing these problems every 4 years? Why these problems keep coming up? 4 years ago, they addressed crime. 4 years ago, they addressed city blackness. 4 years ago, they addressed flooding. And now 4 years later, we have the same people in office saying we're going to address these problems. I am a business owner. I'm also a former veteran. I wish I was eloquent where I could say things in a better way, but the bottom line is, I will get things done through creative, innovative solutions, thinking outside the box. For example, I'm a huge believer in the public-private partnership. And we can get into more of that on my website, but the public-private partnership will remove us from having to depend on taxpayer money and receive funds from private corporations to get a lot of these projects done in a quicker and faster way, cutting through red tape. So if you vote for me, understand that 4 years from now, we won't be addressing these issues. We will be addressing how great Frederick is. We will be addressing how great our new art museum is. We will be addressing how great it is to have a convention center and downtown luxury hotel. We will be addressing how to deal with our development. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next candidate, Mr. Garrahy.
Yes, I agree with a lot of that, but Frederick is a great city to live and work in. I worked with Lowers and Boscov's and a couple other places and working with Tim May. So I've seen the city, and our biggest thing is getting the NACs more involved and the aldermen more involved, and maybe if I do get elected mayor, more Q&As with the mayor, and work my time around the citizens and the businesses, especially if I come out with a big pandemic, trying to find some incentive to bring people from outside the city in, and as well as doing that, because our biggest thing is trying to bring businesses back in town. How can we entice businesses to come in town and with the infrastructure? And like I said, I'm also a retired Army vet, and I have an attitude of improvise, adapt, overcome. If we can improvise something, overcome it, and just do it done, no one is dragging to the feet, because this is getting passed on from administration to administration. So best thing I can do is just get the NACs more involved, work with city police, anybody we can to bring more people downtown, and work with businesses and the people. Because I do a lot of walking around town. I see a lot of bad things happen, and a lot of, like Jeremy had said, the drug and homelessness issue, and work on that. And because Frederick City can be a great city. I've been here since 2005. I've lived in the city since 2005, and I've seen some great things happen. So I'd like to see that continue, and just get more community involvement, in NACs, the businesses, people that live around town, and get their gripes, grievances, and complaints and compliments.
Okay.
I'll get myself more involved.
Okay.
I get more. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Garrahy. Okay, our next candidate is Mr. Hamrick.
Hello, everybody. I'd like to thank everyone for having some excellent dialogue tonight and getting to know each and every one of you and your perspectives. Regardless of who wins, I know we all have the capacity to make this community better. I know that if I was going to be elected, I would spearhead everything that we listened today aggressively and efficiently, and make sure it was getting done the best way we possibly could. And hopefully, no matter what goes on, we do have the capacity to make this city and continue to make this city better. And I hope everyone has a good rest of your evening.
Thank you, Mr. Hamrick. And then our last candidate for the evening is Mr. O'Connor.
Thank you very much, Tamlin. Thank you to our NAC coordinators for organizing a wonderful forum. Thank you to everyone who submitted questions. The NACs have been in a bit of a challenging situation because of the pandemic. Not being apart is not what makes the NACs thrive. Being together is what makes the NACs thrive. And I look forward to, now that we're back together, to seeing the initiatives to look at NAC 2.0 and bring the coordinators together to do that moving forward. I'm going to run out of time, but if I listen to the other candidates tonight, I might believe that I hadn't done anything for the last 3.5 years. New chief, 4-year contract, hybrid vehicles, multicultural liaison unit, mobile crisis response, stormwater management, bulk trash return, Christopher's Crossing, Westside Regional Park, Sophia Madigan's Playground, paperless plan reviews, technology, CIP, parklets, outdoor dining, and street closures to help our residents and businesses during a pandemic, closed captioning, Spanish language interpretation, an ambassador program, the runway extension, DBE review panel, disparity study, diversity and inclusion initiative, housing and human services, a new department. We have accomplished a great deal over the last 3.5 years. What you've also heard tonight are a lot of promises of what people will do. I wake up every day committed to doing what I can do for this city, the city I grew up in and the city I love. Vote for me, Michael O'Connor, for mayor. O'ConnorForFrederick.com. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you so much. Thank you to all of the candidates for participating in this forum. We really appreciate it. I think it will help residents of Frederick make decisions in the primary elections. The primary elections are September 14th. People, September 14th. So please don't forget to vote. Your vote is your voice. And I want to thank everybody for coming out to this event and supporting this event. All of the people who are in Zoom land, you care about your city. I encourage the candidates to still look through those questions that we submitted. I mean, those are the questions of the people, and also the questions that are there on Zoom. So even though we didn't get to them to answer them verbally, I encourage you to look at them. I want to thank the Frederick City Neighborhood Advisory Councils and also Hood College. And on behalf of those groups, I want to thank you all and wish you good night.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night.